How many countries? Have we marked how many
I
countries?
never did. I never counted them all up. But sometimes I'll hear a story from it, and I'll realize, my gosh, I was there. I think. Was I there?
Brian, thank you so much for having us in your lovely home. How are you doing?
Oh, great! Thank you, and my pleasure to have you here.
You write having a Canadian passport meant something. Looking just through your press passes, just seeing the word Canada felt like there was some power to it. Do you think it holds the same sway?
In some areas it does. Canada's still a respected country, though I think it's fallen. It's still in the top 10 of most respected countries, and that can really be very, very helpful for Canadians in Canada. And certainly the government's hoping it will be very helpful as it looks for new trading partners. But it doesn't have that same clout that it used to have when it was very big in peacekeeping, very big in foreign aid. There was a period in the 80s, Canadians may be surprised by this now, but we were often referred to as the Samaritan state, the state that always wanted to be out there helping others. And that gave us a kind of entrance over and over on the ground. Even when I was working with the Americans, I could say, let's go to the Canadian embassy. I think they'll be able to get us in where the American embassy couldn't, because of the various suspicions or what have you. So I had many reasons to really appreciate that Canadian clout before. I think we have wonderful people abroad, and I have to underscore that. I think our reporters that are abroad now are as good as any in history, and I think we still have some extremely good diplomats. But we have to rebuild the strength with more, better, more bureaus, and more logistical support all the way through.
I want to pick up on the Samaritan state. I think we're looking on the inside out. We can be critical of ourselves and be extra critical. Curious, what do other countries, do you think, view us as?
I think other countries, from what I gather, tend to feel that we own the podium in a kind of non-sports way, a non-swaggering way, but in a kind of diplomatic, friendly way. And we sort of step down from that podium, and we're content to go for bronze again. There was a time when in sports, Canada was known as the bronze medal nation.
Right.
Well, we're not anymore. Well, we're up there often for
We're good,
golds and silvers and all that. Well, the same way in our journalism and our diplomacy and the rest of it, we really did manage to get on the podium in the 80s, 90s through that period, and then gave a lot of it up. So they think that for a period we lost focus. We seemed to be a hard country to read. We didn't seem to have a coherent message quite often, or we would have a bumper sticker slogan as a message, and people say, well, what does that mean, really? What are you actually going to give? What kind of people are you going to send abroad? How come you used to have 1,200 peacekeepers in the world, now you've got 25?
Right.
I mean, at some stage it becomes almost a little bit laughable. Now, having said that, I think there's a big change in the Canadian mood so that I feel in the last year. And I think Canadians want to get back and know they have to get back. This I really think is very important. It's not just a wish to be well-liked, it's a wish to be influential again, to be able to be at the signing of documents. Notice Canada wanted to fly into Egypt for the signing of the ceasefire agreement over Gaza. Our Prime Minister phoned up and said, I want to come too.
I'll be there.
I'm not sure we would have done that before. So I think there's much more of Canada taking a we're center stage again role. And I'm very impressed by the amount of media coverage Canada tends to get now in the last 6 months or so over that before.
Elbows up, I suppose.
Yes, well, that was it, even though the elbows aren't quite as high up as they were.
That's fair.
Yeah.
There are places around the world that got lost in the news cycle, and we can kind of talk about how inundated people are with headlines just because of technology. But what are your thoughts on what could be done to help bring attention to places that are not getting?
Well, I think first of all, the networks have to be guilted back into realizing, what you're doing is ridiculous. I mean, I'll give you one horrible example, that Ethiopia fell back into a civil war in recent years for about a 3-year period, in which it's estimated that somewhere between 500,000 and 600,000 people died. That's more people than died in Gaza and Ukraine combined, yet it got almost no coverage in the media. very, very little coverage, except in maybe the British and Al Jazeera in English. And the French gave it more coverage. But basically, we've just gone away from covering stories because they seem complex, more costly to go there. And how would you support a team in the field? We don't do frontline coverage in wars like Ukraine anymore because the insurance is so high. And so we were sort of backing off, covering a lot of areas of the world. We don't cover Latin America nearly as much as we were doing so 20 years ago. This needs to be explained more, but I think the networks have to be somewhat guilted back and guilt themselves back. And I'm hoping that this whole era we're going into now, where Canada's really realizing we're not just Canada-US in terms of importance, we're Canada and a lot of other countries that we better get to know about much more than we do and have been reporting on in recent years. And we're scandalously unaware of really, the big picture in India or Indonesia, Latin America, Africa. I don't think there's a single Canadian broadcast correspondent in Africa at the moment, which is just crazy. So that would help it. And then putting the resources into the coverage, making the coverage good and interesting, which foreign news tends to be. And then at the base itself, you need experienced people able to interpret what's going on in a lesson that's always a crisis mode.
Do you think people are tired, are overwhelmed by seeing images?
Oh, yeah.
And do you think there might be reason to why maybe?
I think that is a massive problem. I worried even back in 1984, all those years ago, that the images we were sending out, at what point would people just say, I don't want to live with these kind of images. I want better, peaceful images. And I can't fault them. I mean, there are certain times when I'm watching images or coverage from afar where I think I'll miss that tonight. I'll watch something else. It's understandable. It's human nature. I don't know what the answer to that is, except to put more of the reporting and less of the image in. I think longer stand-ups by experienced reporters in the field that are less the vivid images, but more the verbal explanation.
Context.
Longer interviews with people who know what they're talking about, and there's so many of those. I mean, they're always good experts wherever you go in the world. Those things can be more compelling at times than the endless images of problems. And the other thing that I think is critically important, one lesson I learned in Ethiopia was a very old Irish priest came up to me in a feeding center and said, you media are just wonderful at coming into crises. You run in, you do 3 days of footage, and then you fly away again, and you don't come back. And we have to stay on afterwards, of course. And the world gets an image that this was a hopeless country of hopeless people who never managed to get off their knees. And you create this wrong impression of complete devastation. You're not around to see people, neighbors come back together, schools reopen. People form alliances and start helping each other. You miss that. So I went back to the CBC and said, he has a real point. And I think CBC's duty must be to go back and do recovery stories a great deal. And they started to send me back almost every 2 years to Ethiopia, where I could focus on the kind of things that gave people encouragement to realize, these horrible scenes you're seeing, they need not be the same scenes 6 months from now if the world responds and the country's given a chance. That's why, in a way, I have to say, even though I'm rather old now, I look forward to seeing the rebuilding of Gaza, not just because it's the most wrecked place I've ever seen on earth, but it's a place that will show that people can, with the proper help, come back, as they do come back from so many places.
I want to pick up on Gaza. Like we've mentioned, you have been witness to some of the biggest moments in history. What do you make of the current moment that we're in right now?
Well, I think we have a ceasefire. We don't have a peace agreement. We have a ceasefire agreement. As you could say, it's a small step, but all peace treaties begin small. People say, well, it's only a small element. Well, you have to start somewhere, and that small element can become the key building block down the road. So I try to be hopeful because I've seen wonderful, hopeful stories. I don't want to give people the impression I've only seen misery in life. I've seen a lot of wonderful recovery and new beginnings life. And You know, I think back even to my childhood as a young child with Europe recovering from the Second World War, people do recover. So I think there's a lot of difficulty now to go on to the next phase, the intervention force. What's it going to be made of? Who's going to volunteer to go into that? How are you going to bring a Palestinian Authority in to work with that intervention force? How are you going to get Hamas to disarm? How are you going to get the Israelis to fully pull back? All these stage by stage things that need a lot of push and pressure. And the good thing I feel, what I think is essential, is that finally all the countries around are saying, that's it, we've had it, this has to stop. And you know, and it was very interesting, that session in Egypt when 20 leaders of the nations got together, because I think that's going to be needed. Pressure can maintain on Israel, pressure maintained on Hamas as well, that you've got to disarm and you've got to leave government.
Brian, I have one question left for you. I know you are retired now, but clearly you are not that far removed from what's happening in the world. But I have to ask, with all the images that you have seen, that you have reported on, when you go to bed, when you close your eyes, is there an image that sticks with you?
The image I always fall asleep to is shelter. People or myself coming to a warm shelter. On my sound machine, I have rain outside. So they're coming in from a scary situation or a rainy situation or a turbulent situation, but they're finding peace and shelter inside. And I think the fact that millions of people can be brought to peace, shelter, and calm, can be brought out of their own nightmares, is something that kind of inspires me all the time to maintain an interest in the world. Otherwise, I would have given up. But boy, I've seen a lot of evil people in my life, but also a lot of saints, a lot of magnificent, heroic people I write about. And that's what I like to fall asleep to, is that comforting image of there's a shelter in the world for everybody.
Brian, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
An honor.
My pleasure indeed.